This is Strawberry Ink, and today's story is personal. It's about a mall, a Monday evening, and a city that still has not healed. This is a story of the Trolley Square shooting in Salt Lake City, a 6-minute massacre that left 5 innocent people dead, 4 others gravely wounded, and a community forever changed. But what happened after the shooting was almost just as shocking. A federal criminal probe that led to 4 young men being indicted for illegally supplying the guns. This is a story about violence, accountability, and the paper trail that led right back to them. It was February 12, 2017, 2 days before Valentine's Day, just after 6:40 p.m. Sulejman Talović, 18 years old, drove into the upper level of the Trolley Square Mall's west parking garage. He was armed with a 12 gauge shotgun, a .38 revolver, and a backpack full of ammunition. Within minutes, he shot Jeffrey Walker and his 16-year-old son, Alan. Alan was hit in the head. He somehow escaped, but his father was not so lucky. Talović stood over Jeffrey, firing again and again. Inside the mall, panic erupted. Sean Munns was shot from 30 yards away. He survived, but Vanessa Quinn did not. She was shot in the chest, then in the head. Talović stormed into Cabin Fever, a gift shop where people were hiding. He shot Caroline Tuft, then Stacy Hansen, who begged him to stop. Hansen was hit in the abdomen, fell into shattered glass. He would live but be paralyzed for 16 years until his death in 2023 from complications related to his health condition, all caused by this shooting. Then came the most devastating moment of all. Talović approached Brad France, Teresa Ellis, and Kristen Hinckley. All 3 were 15 years old. He opened fire at them. Brad died instantly. Kristen and Teresa were still alive until Talović returned and shot them in the head. Carolyn Tuft, wounded and crawling, watched her daughter die. An off-duty officer, Kenneth Hammond, was nearby. He returned fire. The SWAT entered, and after a standoff, Talović was shot 15 times by law enforcement. He died at the scene. The shooting was over, but the trauma had just begun. 5 victims died that night: Jeffrey Walker, Vanessa Quinn, Brad France, Kristen Hinckley, and Teresa Ellis. 4 were critically injured: Alan Walker, Sean Munns, Caroline Toft, and Stacy Hansen. Teresa and Stacy both died years later due to complications from their injuries, as recently stated. All 5 who died on site were identified by the Utah Medical Examiner's Office in Taylorsville. Those who either died later or had to undergo surgery were taken to one of the 2 clinics, the Intermountain Medical Center or the University of Utah Hospital, the Intermountain being in Murray, and the other one in Salt Lake City, the UU. Stacy Hansen had no relation to the Hansen brothers, who are known for their song Bop. And Alan Walker, the one dying in the shooting, is not the same Alan Walker who is a famous DJ in Europe, responsible for producing the song Faded. And I am glad that this was not him, because this shooting happened several years ago. If he would have died back then, I would not be able to enjoy his music. He would not have lived through that. In the aftermath, people wanted answers. Where did this kid get his guns? A federal investigation uncovered that 4 individuals had illegally sold and transferred weapons as well as ammunition to Talović. The FBI, through their federal criminal probe, identified them as Wesley Wayne Hill, Mackenzie Glade Hunter, Brendan Taylor Brown, and Matthew Hautala. The probe was presented by Assistant U.S. Attorney John Huber to a grand jury at the Salt Lake City federal court. All four were indicted. The grand jury recommended a felony firearms offense for each. Huber, together with U.S. Attorney Brett Tolman serving as lead prosecutor, unsealed the indictment and summoned the four to court. Each had a public defender: Kristen Angelos for Brendan, Richard Morrow for Matthew, Scott Wilson for Mackenzie, and Rebecca Skordas for Wesley. Each defendant, with their public defender, surrendered to the Salt Lake City federal court in May 2007. Before Magistrate Samuel Alba, they pleaded not guilty to the charges. Mackenzie and Wesley were allowed to remain free, pending trial without paying bond. Matthew, who was serving in the U.S. Army in South Carolina, did not have to appear physically, but his attorney entered a not guilty plea on his behalf. Brendan was remanded into custody and taken to the Weber County Jail. A detention hearing was held for Matthew shortly after. Magistrate Alba granted him release on a $50,000 bond. He posted it that same day, but the quiet would not last. Eventually, Mackenzie retained private counsel David Finlayson, and Wesley hired Brigada Benitez as his attorney. In August 2007, Mackenzie violated the conditions of his bond. Authorities had access to his home and confronted him. They took him into custody there, directly to the Salt Lake County Jail. And afterwards, Judge Dale Kimball, just like Brendan, ordered him to remain behind bars without bond until further notice. All four defendants would later plead guilty to their charges as parts of plea deals. Judge Kimball imposed different penalties. Three of them, Brendan, Matthew, and Wesley, got 1 year of probation. Wesley got an additional $500 fine. Mackenzie, on the other hand, was sentenced to 15 months in prison. Due to their plea deals, they waived their right to appeal the cases. But for two of them, their legal problems were not over. Brendan and Matthew were both arrested again for violating their probation. One of them was captured in Wyoming and remanded to the Spokane County Jail. Magistrate Karen Marty in Wyoming ordered him to spend 9 months in federal custody, a penalty which he completed at that jail. Assistant U.S. Attorney Darrell Fun chose not to prosecute beyond that point. Brendan was captured at his home due to his probation officer having access to it, and was booked into the Salt Lake County Jail. Judge Kimball resentenced him to 2 months in federal custody, which he served at that jail. Mackenzie Glade Hunter, the only one sentenced to prison time, was initially evaluated at the Davis County Jail before his transfer to the Miami Federal Detention Center in Florida. He was released in 2008, but several years later, in 2017, he died of a drug overdose. Stacy Hansen, who once said, during the shooting, everyone just wants to go home, died of his complications in November 2023, 16 years after being shot. Teresa Ellis passed away earlier that year, having never fully recovered from her injuries. 5 lives stolen, 4 more shattered, and 4 young men whose decisions, reckless, illegal, and thoughtless, helped put the weapons into a killer's hands. The Trolley Square shooting was not just a tragedy of bullets, it was a massacre of access, oversight, and the ease with which death can be handed over a counter. This is Strawberry Ink. I'm your host, Santiago. We tell the stories they'd rather you forget. Stay safe, stay sharp, and always question what's left out of the headlines. Have a good rest of your day and may the victims rest in peace.